Hi, everybody, and welcome on this wonderful Tuesday to our Powerful Pause series. And I'm so excited to have with us today Master Midlife Mindset Coach, Loukia Mastrodimos. Amazing to have you here with us today in the Peri Movement Club. And Loukia is going to be talking to us about living midlife in bold. And I absolutely love your message, and I absolutely love your earrings.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Bold earrings. And Loukia says bold stands for brave, optimistic, limitless, and decisive. I absolutely love that message, and it fits so well with what we do in the Peri and Menopause Movement Club, because we are reshaping our body, reshaping our alignment, reshaping our posture, and getting the most out of our midlife from a physical perspective. And I love that you're all about getting the most out of midlife from an emotional and mindset perspective. So
yes,
tell us a bit about you, Loukia, and what do you do and what you're going to speak to us about today.
Yes, thank you so much, Tracy. I just love what you're doing. I think there's such a need for more mentors and guidance and coaches for women in our age range. So I just love what you're doing. So thank you for inviting me in. As Tracy said, my name's Loukia Mastrodimos, not exactly something that rolls off the tongue. And I am the CEO and founder of Midlife and Bold Inc. And as Tracy has already said, it's bold stands for being brave, optimistic, limitless, and decisive. But little trivia fact, if anyone has become a certain age, you realize that it's hard to see fine print in dark spaces. And so I, at one point, thought to myself, I'm living midlife years here with everything needing to be in bold. And then the idea came to me as creating a brand and a business out of it. So, my text messages are bolded and everything is big and all that. So a little back behind the scenes on how I came up with that brand, Tracy. Poor eyesight. But yeah, so
I have to take photos, right? Of
yes.
Oh, yes. So that
yes.
I can...
yes. I'm definitely at that age. So what, at about 40, I was just really struggling on all levels of my well-being in my mid 40s, emotionally, physically, financially, spiritually, with relationships. I was 20 years plus deep into a career as an educator, public high school educator. I was an associate principal. And then my mother passed away rather suddenly. And then that whole year sort of followed a series of events followed, all with a theme of loss, relationships and jobs and things like that. My principal retiring. And I just realized I was so unhappy. And it was showing in my weight. It was showing in my attitude, my mindset. And I just kept looking around saying, is this it? Is this it? As a public school educator, the holy grail is to retire with your full state pension and call it a life. And I just didn't think I had 15 years left in me to do that. So I looked around for other women who were also feeling this way. And I really felt alone. I felt that most women were either hiding their misery or, pretending to be happy. And I just couldn't do that anymore. So, I created Midlife and Bold with the mission of changing the narrative that it's not too late to recreate and redefine your life, whatever that means for you, right? So there's not enough women our age shouting from the rooftops, go after your dreams, you can do it. And I felt, Tracy and I share similar paths with a coach. I felt like the purple duck in a sea of yellow ducks, looking for my other purple ducks. Like, where are all these other women who want to live boldly? So my transformation included a lot of weight loss, a lot of mindset work, a lot of just fulfilling dreams. So I, moved across the country by myself at the age of 48, packed up the dog and my Ford and headed west. I live in Chicago now and started this business, started a podcast, and just really embraced being brave, finding the optimism when the road got tough, because it did many, many times. Thinking limitlessly about my life and what's possible, and then taking decisive action, right? Because we know that at some point you have to actually take those steps. So that's sort of in brief how I came to be the CEO and founder of Midlife and Bold. Yeah.
That really resonates with me, because I took a bold step when I was also 47. I was trained and worked for many, many years and had my own editing company. And I hated it. I hated it. I hated getting up every day and going to work, but this was my career. This is what I was an expert at. And it got to a point in my life. I mean, having the physical issues that people in my group will know about, that I was feeling so terrible in my body, and sitting at my desk was making me feel even more terrible. That's kind of like prompted me to look at different kinds of movement solutions. Then I did those movement solutions and I was like, you know what? I don't want to be an editor anymore. I want to be a movement coach. So yeah. Tell us about it.
I think all good stories like that, and I know you guys love Tracy and you're in great hands with her and she's an amazing coach, and that's because good coaches get coached and we understand the transformation process, right? And so we get such a high off of it. We want to make other people feel as good as we feel. And that's kind of how it was for me. In addition to therapy and nutrition coaches and trainers and my own mindset work with my coach. I always say it took a village to get me here. I think that that's something that now, once I've invested in myself, I don't have any problem investing in myself going forward. But I think that's where I was. I was like, I don't think I can just exist for 15 more years. I personally needed that sense of personal freedom and to thrive. And I was very stifled as a school administrator. And we're talking 6 years ago, before everything that's been going on the last 2 years that has been going on. And so, what I always say, Tracy, about the bold, I have a manifesto about what bold stands for, but brave for me looks very different than brave for you, right? I work with women who are widowed, who have lost jobs, who are recovering from cancer. And for someone who's been married for 35 years and widowed, brave is going on a blind date, right? For someone, it could be like me, who quits a job, a 6-figure career, and moves across the country. It could be someone who puts on a bathing suit, who's hit her body her whole life and finally decides to go into the pool. So I always say all of these are on a continuum. And what I try to do is empower women to just find their brave path to start with. That's how it starts, obviously, in order to have that limitless mindset about what's possible. Because a lot of behavior change, people always talk about habits and habit stacking. It comes from your identity. And at this age, what I do is really try to help people create a new identity. They're no longer, who they thought they were, yet they don't really see who they could be. And that's where I come in.
Right. Yeah. And I also feel that there's almost a gift in midlife, a gift that women are given, because we are actually physically changing. There's no denying it, right? Those hormone levels are happening. And it could almost be a wake-up call, right? Because there's certain things that we can't ignore anymore, or we ignore to our, at our peril. So what do you find, how do you feel about this physical change that women are going through? And do you find that really does kind of help prompt a more kind of greater life change?
Yeah. I'd say probably most of the women I work with are past the actual process, if there is a past, like they're not in the middle of it, but right. But I had a woman the other day say to me, and I think this is so good, is that she feels like a teenager again, right? She doesn't really, her body is changing. She doesn't really understand what her body's doing. She is mad at it in a lot of ways, right? And then also in terms of her place in life, she's an empty nester, let's say. So she's not actively momming. So she just feels lost, like a teenager sort of wandering, like, where do I fit in? Like she said, I feel like the kid that sits at the high school table again, where my boobs are coming in and none of the other girls are, and I'm lanky and awkward. And I really don't have like this group of friends or that group of friends. And so it's interesting because I was like, well, I never likened it to the teenage years, but between the hormones and the body changes and the not understanding your identity anymore because it's changed, because your day-to-day is different. The kids are gone, or like I said, your spouse and you are no longer together. It is a time of just a lot of confusion and a lack of clarity that is prompted many times for women by what's going on physically for them. Yeah, for
So
sure.
how do you start to help women live without regrets?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So as I mentioned before, my work is really based in reshaping their identity. So many people say to me, well, I don't have confidence, or I have all this fear. So my specialty is helping them overcome fear. But in order to do any of those things, you can't be brave unless you know who you are and how fear impacts your decision. So the BOLD framework that I run my clients through essentially starts with the whole, I call it the Midlife Makeover Core Values Edition. So whether versus the, like the makeover you would get if you sat down at a cosmetics chair, it's more about the internal makeover. And so we really start to redefine, and really what it is releasing. It's so much unlearning to learn. So it's releasing the shoulds. Well, I should have a value of having, hard work, a hardworking work ethic. But it's like, is that really what you value? Do you value more of your own time? Do you value freedom? Do you value creativity? So we really start to reshape the identity, moving them along that continuum, because it's not many times possible. And that's where the fits and starts come, and where people get frustrated, because they set a goal and then they give up when it doesn't go well. Well, they don't believe that. You can't come at this point in your life and come at your life with new goals with the same identity. That's where the failure happens. So if you don't believe yourself to be someone who can have a second career because you're a teacher or a nurse or a psychologist or a therapist or copywriter or whatever, then it won't be possible, right? You have to really reframe that. So we do a lot of work in the beginning. We spend a lot of time on just this notion of who are you now, not who you were, and get rid of the shame of saying, yeah, family, yes, that's a value, but I don't have to be in the throes of the family life, packing lunches and going to soccer practices and attending to my daughter's needs. So maybe it's okay to put me first right now. And so it's a lot of reworking and getting rid of the shoulds, and so much unlearning to let in something new.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Putting ourselves first as midlife women is such a struggle. I know also in my program, the Reshape Method, because we do need to give time to ourselves, to our process, to our transformation. It's kind of a lot of women who I work with feel that finding that time is almost selfish, right?
Yeah,
it can be a
absolutely.
very hard shift to make. So how do you help people through that process when they're so used to being available for their families all the time, when there's still so many demands on them as well? Because now it's not only the kids, we're such a sandwich generation. We've got our elderly parents and relatives as well.
Yeah. So, here's the thing that I know to be true about transformation. It is a series of small shifts. It's not an overnight. So when I work with women, it's generally for 6 months at a time. And so in the process of learning about themselves and using the tools that I give them to overcome fear and really step out of their comfort zone, the doing leads to some believing. So essentially what there is there's this knowing what I want or what I don't want, and then this thing I need to do or stop doing. In the middle is this believing that's wholeheartedly missing. So I like to say I close the gap between the knowing and doing with believing. And so, obviously there's, as you know, as a coach, there's accountability and there's a process by which I guide them through. But when they are able to actually step into and practice this new identity, for instance, I have a woman who's a professor at a university in Minnesota here in the States, and she talked about this body of hers that she doesn't love anymore and doesn't recognize, and how she used to find joy at the WCA, YMCA as a kid. And so she went and stepped out of her comfort zone and her whole midlife self, as she called it, and went to her first yoga and Tai Chi class and started to become confident in doing that, and started to find, so we talked about finding her inner athlete again, right? Because as a child, she was very athletic, and recapturing that piece of her that she had buried so deep into a bad marriage and addiction and raising kids and balancing that as a college professor and no one knowing what's going on in the background, right? So in terms of how do I get them to believe, they start to believe in themselves once they have unpacked some of the stuff, that the fear-based thoughts that are really limiting beliefs that aren't true. And then they start to step into that identity by doing, because as I always say, you don't get confidence by thinking about it. You become confidence. Confidence comes in the doing. So once they get some successes and wins, you know, the brain gets that, right? And the brain says, I want more of that. I want to feel more like that. I don't want to feel like I used to feel. And then, you know, that momentum builds. But it is a lot of work in the beginning to reframe that identity. And so there is, like I said, a lot of letting go and embracing small B's, small braves, you know, stepping into that, and before they get to maybe making some huge decisions.
Yeah. I love that. Right?
Yeah.
Because we need to build up exactly what you said. Otherwise, going from here to here is very, very scary.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, you know, when it comes to, you know, a big piece of people's identities at this point have been comprised of two very big things for many people: children, not everyone, but children, and their work. And when those two disappear, it's very earth-shattering. You know, it's like, well, I have been doing all the things as an accountant, a lawyer, a teacher, a nurse. I have been doing all the mom things. And so what I like to say is, how do you show up in this world and just be yourself? And the identity is so absent for them, because their labels and their titles have been wrapped up in others, that saying, who am I, is so foreign to them, right? So in my program, I've unleashed people's inner artistry, and, you know, they're now starting an art business, and, you know, just authors and bloggers and all these things. Well, I've always liked writing, right? So they're sort of like recapturing what had been lost to them all those years because of different, you know, things that normal life takes over, right?
I love that. And the word that's coming up for me, which is a word we use a lot in the Perimenopause Movement Club and in my program, is alignment. Where
oh, absolutely.
To get back to your physical alignment, which is what I do. And it sounds like you're saying helping people find their true alignment in their being and in the expression of themselves, and almost going back to who they used to be or what they used to want.
Right. I love that as well. And I often say that stress comes from the misalignment of your thoughts and your behaviors and your actions.
Sure.
And they all need to line up. And so a big part of what I do is work on the women's language. So language is how we learn. And there's a lot of even themes that I'll hear them say that are so limiting, you know, they don't even hear it themselves. And that's the power of coaching, as you know, is someone's on the other end saying, oh, did you hear yourself say the word quitter? So I had a client who, by all accounts, 28 years recovering, you know, addict, an LCSW, so a licensed therapist at this point, clearly completed college, but she had quit school at one point as a high school student, and then gotten her GED, and then gotten, you know, through to college in a different route. She still had that identity of quitter, right? So trying to like reframe that was interesting for her. And so what she kept doing were all these things that her identity of not being a quitter, staying in jobs she hated, staying in relationships she hated, because that is what she was almost trying to make up for, this like major life thing that happened to her. And so I said, well, the reason you're feeling so agitated is because you're not in alignment with who you really want to be at this point. This career doesn't serve you anymore. That relationship doesn't serve you anymore. But if you leave them, in her eyes, it was quitting, right? So that whole readjusting and recalibrating. And I use this you know, technique all the time, is forget what the shoulds, forget what the accomplishments are. How do you want to feel? And that word throws women, because we're not taught to lead with our emotions, to make decisions with our emotions. And so, you know, I had a woman who was so chaotic after work one day. Our session was just, I could tell she was agitated. And I said, well, how do you want to feel at work? Because we were working on finding her new career path. And she just looked at me and was like, I don't know what you mean. I was like, well, you feel stressed and you feel chaotic right now. How do you want to feel? She had to really think hard to be like, how does she want to feel? Because nobody had ever asked her that. Because is that important at work? Yes, it is important. You should want to feel calm and valued. And, anyway, so a lot of times our goals are backed in through feelings versus like, well, I should be on a diet, but does that diet feel good to you? So that's a lot of it too, is giving them permission to lead and tap into how they want to feel. Because as you know, mothers, like, you're always worried about the kids and nobody cares if you're hungry, you got to feed the kid first. So like it's so primal to just disregard our own feelings as women. And so I'm teaching them to tap back into that. So yeah.
Amazing. So do you have any, first of all, there are quite a few people watching. So if you have any questions for Loukia, or any feedback that you want to give us, please, I'm watching the post. And if you watch on the replay, just type replay, and I'm sure Loukia can answer any questions that you have. But if you could maybe give us some takeaway strategies that women can start thinking about, because I know for me, when I was in this place of I hate my life, I hate my work, I've got deadlines to do, I've got bills to pay, I have to do this. It was so hard for me to even think that there could be something else available. But at the same time, I had that similar feeling to you of, this cannot be the rest of my life. This cannot be the next 15 years, right?
Yeah.
And then my path just kind of, it happened along its way. I was almost pulled into doing this, but when I found it, it was almost this instant familiarity. This like, yes, I didn't even know this is what I existed, that this existed, but this is what I want, right?
Yeah.
So do you have any kind of tips or strategies to help women start to find a path that is more in alignment with who they want to be for the rest of their lives, if they're not happy with where they are now?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I love that your story, my stories are very different, very similar, I should say, in terms of our path sort of meandered. So one thing I know for sure is when you I like to say, when you go through an open door and stop going through the revolving door, something new is going to come your way, right? Because doing the same thing, taking the same job at a different company, thinking it's going to be better when you actually hate the work is not change, right? Yes. So I really work on transformation from the standpoint that my clients hold themselves to higher standards and refuse to settle for, whatever the less than is. So one of the things I would say is ask yourself, are you making decisions out of fear or hope? Fear-based decisions keep doors closed to you, right? If you stay in a job that you hate, because that's what you've been trained to do. No one leaves after this many years. You think that you won't find another job based on your age, all the different myths that I confront all the time. You will continue to keep the doors closed and nothing will change. However, if you make a decision out of hope, well, I'm just going to put my resume out there. I'm going to hire a coach and see how this works for me. Undoubtedly, doors were open. There's not been one instance in any of my own personal life experiences or anyone I've worked with who hasn't started down a path of self-inquiry and gotten better, gotten something out of it, right? So that's number one. And the other thing is, the all or nothing mindset is really what keeps most women stuck, and that's all fear-based. So as I mentioned earlier, my specialty is fear, and fear shows up as self-sabotage, as no motivation, as a lack of self-care, as stress, as resistance. So really ask yourself, like, is the all or nothing because if you don't succeed at it being perfect, well, then you can stay exactly the same, right? So people often say it's fear of failure, but I think it's fear of being seen and fear of, if it does go well, what would happen, right? Like, who would I be? When I started on my health journey, who would I be if I wasn't the burger, beer eating Friday night happy hour girl, but instead I went to yoga and meditated, right? Like that fear of like being different is so prominent at this age. And then so that's what I would say is really ask yourself. I ask myself that question all the time. Is this a fear-based decision, Loukia, or is it hope-based? Because a hope-based decision leads you down a path of inquiry and curiosity, and where you're opening doors. And so if you're trying to make a major life change, those are some things I would consider to ask yourself, to just do that self-inquiry work. I put together a guide like the ABCs to get out of the midlife slump. And that's, one couple of things that I talk about, like, is it an all or nothing mentality? Because guess what? Usually it leads to nothing when all doesn't work out, right? So I always say, take the next right step. It doesn't have to be the step, right? When I left my career 6 years ago, I took a selfie and drove out of the parking lot of the school and thought I will never return to a school ever. That wasn't the case. I ended up in corporate. I ended up back in a school. I became a certified yoga teacher. I had a business. I dissolved that business a few years ago. I started Midlife in Bold. But all along the way, I have no regrets, because I've done everything I've set out to do, which is now to create a beautiful community of midlife women who see themselves differently. And here's what the beauty is, Tracy, about what you and I do. They're creating legacies now for future generations. So our daughters, our nieces, younger girls in our sphere of influence see that life isn't over at this age, right? And so had I not stepped out to do that, had you not stepped out of your fear to do what you're doing, none of the people's lives that we have impacted would be impacted in the same way. And I can't imagine doing anything different. So I don't know if that was a long answer to your question, but essentially a lot of us sit in this fear, which is totally unfounded, right? I know one thing for sure, it's that waiting for certainty is the death of success. If you wait till you are 100% sure something's going to work out, it'll never happen.
Yeah.
It'll never happen.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
No, that is a beautiful, beautiful answer. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Good.
Because
Good.
it's almost as though as we take the action, like I had no idea where I was going with any of this. I just knew that there was something I didn't want, and that there was something else. I'm not sure what it even looked like, but I kept saying to myself, it will reveal itself as I move down this path.
Right.
And it's almost though it starts to manifest as you take the steps, right?
Yeah.
Because
right.
you can never be certain, and that certainty will hold you back. And I loved what you were talking about earlier, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit more, the self-talk. The self-talk.
Yeah. 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 And let me just also say that when you wait for certainty, it is, here's, I talked a lot about identity. When women want to do something different, let's say joining your group, right? They don't know what's going on with their bodies. They're joining your group to get help, right? They're joining your program to get targeted support so that they can, have a different way of being. A lot of my women want to start businesses, become authors, change careers. What women confuse is skill acquisition and identity. I didn't know how to become a business owner. I was a teacher for 20 plus years. But not having the skills, I was saying that was my identity. Well, I'm not a business owner, I'm a teacher. All that is a skill acquisition, right? And if you think about the first 20 years of our life, we spent preparing for adulthood. We learned how to, back in the day, write checks. We learned how to drive cars. We went to school. Why are we not at this age saying, maybe I have to spend, the next 5 years to reshape my body or learn my new career skills, to have a different ending to my story. If you devoted all those years in the beginning to getting prepped for life, this is no different, right? But we see it as like, oh, I should know this. And I had a client once say, well, I hired Loukia because I've never been 58 before. I don't know what it's like to be my age, right? Yeah. So I just had to say that. But the self-talk, yes. So I have a quick strategy that I'll share with people that I think is helpful, because I use it on myself sometimes too. I use a lot of, I think we use our own tools, right? That's why we do what we do. But number one is, what is the limiting belief I have, right? So just state it. I don't think I know how to run a business. I've always been overweight. I can't lose weight, whatever it is. And then the second question is, do you know that's true? Beyond a shadow of a doubt. Like, do you have absolute certainty that you can't be a business owner, that you can't lose weight, that you can't find another job? 99.99% of the time, the answer is That's not true, right? So then the question is, okay, let's write how it would feel to be the person who is able to lose weight, who is able to run a business. Write down all the ways it makes you feel. Instantly, people's tones change. Oh, well, I would feel energetic and light, and I would be able to walk and keep up with my grandkids. I would be able to like go to work every day and feel smiling. And I say to them, do you just feel how your energy completely shifted that way? Right? So then I say, now, so knowing that that's how you would feel, and that's the person that you want to be, what's one small step you can take in the direction of that thought, of that belief, the belief that you can do this? And they'll say things like, oh, well, maybe I'll, reach out to my local gym and see if they have personal training packages. Maybe I'll write, whatever it is, right? Maybe I will actually work with you and have you look at my resume and, go forward and start to reframe what it is my career outlook is. So that's just something, in the moment that I can help people with. And the other thing in my community that my free community, we have Why Not Me Wednesdays. And I say, why not you? Like, why not you? So those are just some things, and like anything, it takes practice. I work with women who are mostly over 50, but some in their 40s. So we're talking 5-6 decades of thinking a certain way. It just takes practice, like building a muscle. You have to work with the weights for a long time before you see that definition. So the mind is, I like to say coaches are personal trainers for the mind, right? So it takes time and repetition and consistency and some targeted strategies and support to help you start to see yourself differently. Yeah.
Because change is hard. Even if it's change that is going to be good for us, it's still so hard. And so maybe you can talk a little bit about resistance.
Yeah.
And we can end on that.
Yeah. Well, resistance actually is a form of fear. So one of my favorite books I've ever read, I've listened to it on audio 3 times, is called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield.
Yes.
And he talks about, right? Yeah. I mean, the first time I was listening to the book, I was driving across the country and almost drove into a side of a mountain in New Mexico. So I was like, oh my gosh, is this man talking about me? But he talks about this unlived life, that we have this life we live and the life that we want to live, and in between lies that resistance. And the other thing he says, which I love, and I share this with my clients all the time, is the greater you're resisting something, the greater it is to your soul's calling. So the more I resisted help, because I'm very independent and can be stubborn that way, the longer it took for me to realize success. So, when you're resisting help from someone, a new idea, a new way of doing something, a solution, and you see evidence of it, right? Like every week in my community, I post examples of women breaking limiting beliefs and stereotypes about what's possible and recreating themselves. And you're still sitting, I say this to members of my community, you're still sitting in my community thinking, well, she must have this advantage or that advantage. That's your resistance. And that's your fear of being seen as being able to do something different. Because when you start to hold on to an identity so hard that doesn't serve you anymore, ask yourself why. What is the benefit for you? There's some benefit to staying small for you. You might say to yourself, well, there isn't, because I want to be this way. Well, I would say something is still keeping you stuck that way, and we have to figure out what that is. So that resistance is just your louder whispers as you get older saying, I want something else, but I'm just scared, right? So once you can learn how to process through that fear, like I tease people that the only fear I have is hurting someone unintentionally, ending up in jail, or death. If those 3 things don't happen to me, I could care less. I'm going to try it. I don't care about like spending money that I may or may not have. I don't care about looking like a fool, right? Like, those are the things I worry about. I don't want to end up in prison. I don't want to hurt anybody intentionally, of course. Unintentionally that may happen, but I try not to, be aware of that. And I don't, obviously I don't wish death upon myself. And people laugh because I'm very blunt like that, but I'm like, other than that, they're just learning. They're stepping stones for me learning. That resistance is just your inner voice calling to you and saying, you don't have, here's what I say. I believe women of this age are amazing. I believe they're powerful. I believe they're limitless. Unfortunately, time is not on our side. So while we can be limitless, time is not limitless. And so I choose to not look back and say, I have regrets that I didn't do that. I want to say I tried it, checked it off my list, and I lived up to my potential. That's how I feel is the way I want to live my life.
100%, 100%.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Absolutely love that. Right.
Yeah.
I had no idea what I was doing when I first set up this Facebook group 4 years ago.
No way.
And now we have almost 2,000 amazing women in the group. So
yeah,
thank you so much for coming to us. I love your message. I love your approach.
Yes, I love what you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I love your 3 things, right?
Yeah.
Don't want to hurt someone, don't want to go to jail, and don't want to die. Because it really is, it's about kind of going, well, what's the worst case scenario, right?
Yeah.
What's the worst case scenario?
Exactly. And you have to,
then anything else is possible. So
and even, Tracy, even just saying what it is, because for me, when I first left my 6-figure career, my worst case scenario when it came to finances was that I would have to live with someone else, that I wouldn't be able to afford. And guess what? I was okay with that. And I called 3 friends and I said, can the dog and I live with you for 6 months to get back on my feet? Should this go horribly wrong? And they were like, is this a joke call? I was like, no, I'm serious. I'm doing an exercise and I need to know, can I move in with you? And so once I faced that big fear, I've never once missed a house payment, a car payment. The dog and I are fed every day. I provide for my family, right? So yeah, exactly. That's why I boiled it down to those 3 fears. So anyway.
Stepping into your power and living in alignment. I love that.
That's right. Yes. Oh, so good.
Maybe if you could tell our clubbers how they can get hold of you and learn more from you.
Sure. So my all my social media handles on Facebook and Instagram are at Midlife in Bold, so all one word. From there, if you visit my page on Facebook, Midlife in Bold, you'll see there's a visit group link. The group is called Midlife Women Making Change Without Fear. I have a free guide that I can give you a link for, Tracy, if you want to share in your community, or I can post it in the group later if you want. But just, comment into the group and see if it's something that is interesting to you. And if not, that's okay too. Maybe this was just a helpful conversation, but it's midlifeinbold.com. It's Midlife in Bold on Instagram. It's Midlife in Bold on Facebook. So pretty easy to remember, because my name is not easy to remember. So we made a business and a brand that was easier to say and remember.
Amazing. Thank you. And we'll put all your links below. And I'm sure, what is your guide that you have to offer people? Oh,
sure. It's the ABCs to break out of your midlife slump. So it's basically a 3-step formula to break out of your midlife slump and take action. So, and because I was a former teacher, I thought the ABCs would be cute. So that's how I, yeah.
Amazing. So, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tracy. Yeah. Thank
All
you.
the best. Bye-bye.
Bye.